Hey folks, welcome to another Water Trek 360. I'm here in San Pedro, California with the Dive Boat Magician. We're going to go out and check out some kelp and some reefs. Let's see how it goes. On this day, I was aboard the Magician out of San Pedro. It's a 65-foot U.S. Coast Guard rated vessel that is certified to carry up to 44 passengers or 28 divers. It has bunks for up to 14 passengers while at the dock or on overnight trips. They have a full galley and served up a hot breakfast and lunch, and then some snacks and sweets for the ride home. I'm not affiliated with the Magician. I just used them for this trip. I booked these dives through Eco Dive Center in Culver City. It's always fun to see large schools of common dolphin riding the bow waves. For our first dive, we headed to a spot near Parsons Landing on the northwestern part of Catalina. We dove in a little cove with our boat moored about where the boat is in this picture. We headed to the rocks along the eastern side of the cove for our first dive. While I did get to see quite a few of these tube anemone as we swam, in retrospect we should have done a longer surface swim as we dropped into about 60-65 feet of water on a sandy bottom before getting to our final destination, which is only 35-40 feet along the rocks and reef. The first thing that jumped out were these large rocks covered in intertidal purple sponges. It was quite pretty. I saw a few giant California sea cucumbers, sometimes called the warty sea cucumber. I know they're edible, but I'm not there yet. I did see quite a few of these blue banded gobies hiding alongside the black urchin. These little guys are everywhere, but missed a lot by divers since they are small and like to hide in crevices. These little fish are bidirectional hermaphrodites, capable of rapidly switching sexes to facilitate reproduction with nearby individuals. A blue-banded goby can change sex within just a few days. Unlike some other hermaphroditic fish, blue-banded gobies can change back and forth when needed. I also saw some large California golden gorgonians. Some of these sea fans were quite large. Once we pushed away from the sand and got more into the rocks, single then multiple kelp strands appeared. The sun started to peek through and the distinctive yellows of the kelp shone through. This was an awesome sight. With the bulk of my diving having been done on the East Coast, diving kelp is a treat for me. I love the visuals. Unfortunately, on this day, the only sea lion I saw was briefly during my surface interval on the boat. Of course, there were Garibaldi everywhere. While diving Catalina in February is not as popular as the summer months, it does offer most of the same opportunities for marine life with just fewer divers. They say the best diving is from July to December, with September through November offering the best visibility. Winter storms deplete a lot of the kelp. New sprouts begin in February and March and grow fast, and by the April peak growing month, they've usually reached the surface. The water temperature on this day was 56 degrees Fahrenheit. After just diving in St. Croix a few weeks ago, it was a bit chilly. I didn't bring my dry suit, so by 40 minutes in, I was cold. So we headed out of the kelp and back to the boat. During our surface interval, the boat captain moved us to another site closer to Twin Harbors, near Howland Landing, more south and to the east, but still on the northern side. This site was called Big Geiger. There are two sites, Big Geiger and Little Geiger, which is a little farther to the southeast. This site is a scalloped cove with the typical Catalina rocky shore. For our first dive on Big Geiger, my dive partner and I did a surface swim to the southern part of the cove, as the arrow indicates. This rock formation was slightly shallower than the previous dives, where depths were maxed at around 35 feet. Another difference on this site was that the kelp was much thicker and right up to the sand, and you were in it pretty quickly. On this site, I truly felt like I was in a forest. One of the things I noticed about this site was the large amount of sargassum, or devil's weed. While it's probably been here since the mid-70s and first noticed in Long Beach Harbor in abundance in 2003, possibly from ships from Korea or Japan where it is native, it didn't become apparent that Sargassum horneri was actually spreading rapidly until 2017. After a year of warm water allowed the invasive algae to grow particularly thick and block sunlight, that's when researchers saw an impact on the native species. It spread to the Channel Islands, and Catalina is no exception. It chokes out the kelp and is a problem. Fortunately, the clouds went away and it was a pleasantly sunny day as the forecast had called for rain. Visibility was much better than the first dive. The water temperature was about the same, roughly 57 degrees. You never know what you'll stumble upon, like this sea salp or thetis. Salps normally live in deep water, coming up at night to feed. They can grow to 13 inches. This one was roughly 6 inches. Like comb jellies, they have a hard, gelatinous body. I was fortunate enough to happen upon a pair of giant kelpfish during their mating ritual. I wasn't there long enough to watch the conclusion, but this is a seldom seen event, and it was a lucky find. This site was my favorite of the day due to the lushness and depth of the kelp. Even though the sun was out and we were at a shallower depth, not having my dry suit made a difference, and I cut this dive short too, at around 40 minutes. Before our third dive, we did our lunchtime surface interval, where we were served a hearty hot lunch. It was quite the experience, way different than most boats I've dived with in the Northeast US, where amenities are more Spartan and you bring your own food. Our third dive was also at Big Geiger. This time we headed to the northern part, where the rocks jut out into a point. We again did a long surface swim until 50 feet or so from the rocks, then descended to a sandy bottom. There were fair-sized patches of seagrass between larger areas of sand and the rocks. This part had much larger segregated rock features, large boulders away from the main ledge, creating a bit of a maze you could traverse through. I was told this site generally had quite a few octopus, but we didn't see any. The striking thing about this site was the sheer number of spiny lobster we saw. I must have seen at least 30 or so, and they are all quite large. This is the result of Big Geiger being part of a larger North Shore Marine Protection Zone extending from Arrow Point down to the Isthmus. I was reticent about mentioning this as poaching is still an issue, but my understanding is Marine officers are quite vigilant. Sea cucumber were out in force this day. As we moved farther out to the tip of the rocky outcrop, there was a lot more surge. With current, we opted to move back towards the cove for the return portion of the dive. Although the kelp was not as dense on this dive, it was a really pretty dive. Lots of fish, Garibaldis of course, and the bottom was strewn with small rocks covered in purple and brown sponge, adding a different effect. So that's my experience diving Catalina in February. I'm in California for 2 months and planning on doing a couple more excursions in March and into April. As mentioned, I am not affiliated with the Magician's Dive Boat nor Eco Divers. There are several other dive operations out here, not only in San Pedro and Long Beach, but boat and beach operation and diving from Catalina itself. If you are here in February, remember to dress warmly on the boat. They do get winter storms. The water is cold and you'll need at least a 7mm wetsuit if you do not have a dry suit. Stay tuned for updated videos on the iPhone 14 Pro, as well as a review of the couple of apps that I want to use to try and help improve the 14 Pro's video quality. Stay safe, enjoy your diving, and as always, until the next time, go explore, get wet,